get up, and on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
Well, hi there, Kneecaps Nation. You are a day late, but definitely not a buck short on this latest edition of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar along with Phil Byrne, as always. And Phil, happy start to the week to you.
Yeah, you bet. Definitely not a buck short. Never a buck short here on Kneecaps for Breakfast. Just happens to be Tuesday. You know, we're going to be good. We're all good with that.
Well, and somebody who's as schedule and routine rigid as I am, you'd think I would be the last person to be the broken cog in the motor on this one. And it occurred to me almost before it was too late that we were going to be going to a concert this past Sunday evening up at Pine Knob, which is when we typically would record our episode. And usually it's not a huge deal, but since I found out that REO Speedwagon and Train were going to be in town, that was a little bit too much of a good thing to pass up. So I figured, we can be a day behind on our podcast, and I don't think that's going to throw too many people off their game.
You wanted to catch that train, huh? You didn't want to see the train leave the station, huh?
Believe it or not, this is actually the 3rd time I've caught the train. I'm going to be a sad guy once Pat Monahan decides to hang it up after all these years, but no, good show on both ends. Both trains did a good job. REO Speedwagon, still at 72 years of age, is still humming along just fine. So, good time up there in the greater Clarkston, Michigan area.
Hey, not too far from me. Not too far from me. So that's cool stuff. That's good. But we'll again try to get back to our routine of doing this. But one week off, especially in the summertime, might not make too much of a difference. But I will say this though, Lions got a little bit of a unique start to their schedule. So I know on some of the Monday night games that we'll be looking at, obviously we'll try to accommodate to where it would be after the game as well. So just a quick little programming note on there, but still got plenty of things we want to touch on this week. Isn't that right, Vince?
You got that right, Phil. And we started off this past week with a little bit of good news. And this was kind of a contentious topic, you could say, over the last several years of the relationship between the Lions organization and Calvin Johnson, the Hall of Fame receiver. And it didn't necessarily end the greatest between the two sides, where when Calvin decided to hang it up a little early, the Lions more or less asked for $1.6 million worth of their signing bonus back as if you're not going to play, at least give us some of that money back that we already repaid you ahead of time. And that was not really the answer they should have given in Calvin's eyes. And that kind of led to a little bit of almost a public divorce of some sort. Yeah. But time and some effort healed some of those wounds, and now things seem to be a lot better between the organization and the Lions. And we're finally now at a point to where the Lions approached Megatron and offered him a spot in their 20-person ring of honor, if you will, called the Pride of the Lions. And he graciously accepted, and he'll be initiated into that fraternity on the Monday night game against Seattle on September the 30th. So what a great venue that's going to be to have such a ceremony take place. I remember you and I were both at the game against the Raiders last season where Lomas Brown got initiated into the Pride of the Lions. So now Calvin will be the next guy on board for that. So pretty cool moment that we're going to be seeing in about 9 weeks from now, Phil.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, kind of this whole Calvin thing, I know Rod Wood was still in Allen Park and with the Lions organization when it all went down, and he's still obviously very much front and center with regards to the public-facing roles in the organization. But to me, it really struck a chord that yes, Calvin may have been in the wrong. Yes, the Lions organization may have been in the wrong, but just how bad at dealing with personalities, the Quinn Trisha era was, and it all kind of stemmed back from that. And Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia had a certain way that they wanted to do things, and it was not really the most respectable or approachable way of doing things, right? And they certainly had no tie to Calvin Johnson, and yet they were, trying to kind of push their way through it. So it happened. Both sides have really mend the fences as far as we can tell. Calvin is at every home game now. He still lives in the area. But it's truly great to see this franchise honoring his legacy. And yes, it didn't come with any playoff wins or anything like that, but um, honestly, I think modern NFL post 1997, 98, him and Randy Moss, most physically um, capable receivers, out there, freaks, if you will, right? So those two guys for sure. So it'll be cool. And honestly, like I like the Barry statue, but I'd love to get another statue outside, Ford Field. And I think Calvin's going to be that next guy. If they are going to like continue to build these out a little bit, or certainly like reward the guys who are modern players who have made the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, no doubt about it. As long as they don't do a process pose as part of his statue, I mean, that's not going to go over too well in these parts.
No, no. The only process should be what's the the pose going to be, I guess, for his statue, and definitely not the actual process play itself.
But not a guy more deserving than Calvin Johnson. And that's so awesome that things seem to have calmed down a little bit between Megatron and the organization. I know he credited Lions COO Mike Disner by name as sort of the guy driving the bus behind maybe making those olive branch extensions toward Calvin Johnson. And I think it's well documented that Sheila Ford Hamp has also taken a few lessons as far as maybe some more interpersonal relationship skills as it pertains to being more of a player's owner in recent years, and maybe things that she did or didn't do some 5, 6 years ago, sitting here today, maybe now that she knows a little bit more, wishes maybe she had played things a little bit more, or at the very least delegated people around her to maybe do things a little bit differently. But nonetheless, things are definitely in a better spot now than they were.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it's easy to say that times are good when you're winning, but it takes a strong-willed individual to admit past wrongs, I guess, and try to just be better people and move on and mend fences. And just like any bad breakup, or anything like that, it's good to see that both sides are amicable and they're willing to work with each other, right? Because I think there will be a time after he's retired as well when it comes to Matt Stafford. And yes, he got a Super Bowl win with the Rams. But I'm kind of curious to see how we sort of embrace him, right? So, like, I know he doesn't live here anymore, but at some point, I think the conversation needs to be had, just considering he has all the records in the record book. How does Stafford's legacy through that era where they did not win anything, kind of factor in as well? So, stay tuned on that. All I know is Lions have a good quarterback right now. Who knows where those records will be, especially if we end up winning the big one with the current guy that we have.
You know what, Phil? I'm trying to use some restraint here. I want to double back with a question on Stafford. It's completely irrelevant because it goes off on a complete left turn tangent. And I think there will be a time and place for us to tackle that at some point.
Yeah.
It's just not going to be today because that question's not going to leave my mind anytime soon. But good stuff with the Lions and Calvin Johnson. More good stuff down at Allen Park as training camp gets going in full force this coming week. It's so hard to believe that from the very first airing of the Kneecaps or Breakfast pilot episode back in mid-January during the playoff run, and now here we are, training camp getting going this coming week. The first practice with the full squad taking place on Wednesday. The rookies are already in town at camp, kind of getting into the flow of things, and the veterans will be here later on today, Tuesday. So that's going to be having the entire team around, and again, the first practice on Wednesday. So a lot to be on the lookout for as we move forward with this week. One thing I did want to bring to your attention, Phil, is the dreaded 3 letters PUP, physically unable to perform list is out for the start of this training camp. And Three big guys on the defense in more ways than one, not just the physical size and stature. So DJ Reader, we knew was going to be an issue. He battled the injury that he sustained with Cincinnati, the torn quad, and he was expected to miss some time in training camp. He missed all of the offseason with the injury. And really, Dan Campbell, all offseason long, was sort of hinting that whatever we don't see out of him early in this part of the season isn't going to be much of a surprise to anybody. Marcus Davenport also going to be starting off training camp on the PUP list. He was out for all of 4 games for Minnesota last season, so he's still trying to work through what had hampered him last season. One of the returning guys, second-year man Brian Branch, also going to be on the PUP list to start preseason as part of a cleanup issue with his ankle. That doesn't seem like it's going to be a real big deal, and he should be able to catch a good chunk of training camp still to come. And then the new kid out of Boston College, Giovanni Manu, is going to be on the non-football injury list to start training camp. So he'll miss a little bit of time to get things going. But other than that, Phil, looks like we got a full roster beyond those 4 guys heading into the start of our workouts on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be little nicks and bruises and injuries, not only during training camp but leading up to it. Yes, it is a long period of time. It's usually at the start when we're the healthiest, as some of these teams are. But it's football. These are large men. It's easy to get some of these injuries or things that just maybe need a little bit more time to heal. So, not overly concerned. I would say the most that I'd be concerned with would be like DJ Reader if this was like an ongoing situation. I think kind of the other situations with those guys, I really, it's fine. He'll be okay. Reader's probably the one though that I think has the ability to really transform that defensive line, into an absolute ferocious unit. And if he misses any significant amount of time, whether it's just like week 1 or week 2, those are games that, you'd love to have him out there for. So we'll just kind of have to play this one by ear and kind of see how we progress kind of week by week, getting them back. The other thing with him too is he's a veteran in training camp. What does he really need to prove? So
I was just about to say that is that you don't need to
yeah,
get those type of training camp and preseason reps as a veteran more so than you do a unproven commodity, a younger guy, even though he's stepping into a different defense, getting into the Aaron Glenn defense here in Detroit. I'm sure he can pick up on a lot of those concepts pretty quickly. He's played enough football over the years to where I don't think this is going to hamper him necessarily so much as that might maybe just some team synergy and making sure everyone's on the same page and some of those reps. But even then, as a veteran, you're not going to get a whole lot of those in a real live situation until you get to Sunday night, week 1 against the Rams.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I mean that's what it's leading to. So, again, we'll just kind of have to see how it plays out throughout the rest of the summer here.
Now, looking into training camp, we have talked about this somewhat at length of what are the Lions going to do past Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's number 1 receiver far and away. He's 1A, 1B, all the way down the list. The question has been, what are they going to do about the number 2 receiver? And they didn't necessarily go out and get a tried and true number 2 receiver. We hinted maybe last week, maybe you look at like a Michael Thomas or something like that to add some depth to the receiver class. So maybe you go from 1 down to a 3, 4, 5, but you're still missing that number 2 guy in place. Maybe they pick some guy up off the cut list at the end of preseason. Who knows? But as of right this minute, they don't have a solution as the number 2 receiver heading into training camp. Or do they?
Well, possibly. So Vince, yeah, go ahead.
No, what's on your mind, Phil?
So
it sounds like you got an idea.
so kind of just pondering about this. We already know, I don't know if this was like hearing some fantasy football rankings coming out, and knowing where LaPorta, oh, spoiler alert, sits among the tight end rankings, but is it possible that the Lions number 2 receiver is not a true wide receiver, but is actually Sam LaPorta.
Dun dun.
And he's just hiding in plain sight. And we're going to see more volume from him. We're going to see him more lined up like a receiver. I think about Brock Wright getting the large contract that he did. And as much as that was perhaps a contest to get the deal done and keep him in Detroit instead of going to San Francisco, you don't pay him that much to just sit on the bench, right? So, and I know we run the 2 tight end packages and things like that. But what if we're going to use LaPorta a little bit more in the slot? What if we're going to use him a little bit more outside?
And put Brock Wright as more your traditional tight end? That just sounds so crazy and maniacal. It just might work.
It just might work, and you got Ben Johnson pulling the strings. So I think, Vince, we've had that number 2 receiver on the roster the whole time, and it finally just took it to training camp and hearing some stupid fantasy football rankings for it to finally click and the light bulb to turn on in my stupid mind. Vince, I think Sam LaPorta is our number 2 receiver.
86 catches, 880 yards, and 10 touchdowns out of the tight end spot a year ago, his rookie year, while he battled a little bit of injury here and there. That's not to mention what he was able to contribute in the postseason, because those were just his regular season stats. So the question is going to be, how do they build him up to get some more volume? Because those are great numbers for a tight end, no doubt about it. But if you're looking to be a number 2 guy, you kind of got to get a little bit more maybe into that 100 catch, or maybe some more in the way of receiving yards, being more of maybe a downfield threat than what he is. So the question is going to be, how can they work him up into that, while at the same time he's built like a tight end. He doesn't have necessarily the mobility or the nimble nature as maybe a wide receiver 2 would necessarily have, something to work towards. But I think you might be onto something with already having a solution here in house that you don't need to go out and spend a boatload of money on, because right now LaPorta is getting paid peanuts and Cracker Jack at this point.
So I think part of it too is, once we kind of see this through, I think we can ease some of the expectations off of Jameson Williams. Now listen, we still know where he was picked. We still know kind of what athlete he is and what he can bring. I do not think Jameson Williams is going to be a 7 catch a game kind of receiver, right? I think you're going to get 3-4 receptions probably.
And that's the problem. It seems like
yeah.
every time you talk about Jameson Williams, it's not so much the number of catches he's going to get in the course of a game, but how many touches he's going to get over the course of a game, because he can definitely do more than just sit there and catch passes.
Yeah. And you know, I think the thing is I think you just shouldn't view him as the number 2 receiver. I would anticipate he's going to be on the field as a starter, you know, and he'll be on the field 80-85% of the time or something like that. But we just shouldn't expect that that volume is going to be there, because he's filling in for Josh Reynolds, you know, and we have to kind of fill that gap. I think that gap is Sam LaPorta. I think he's the guy that's picking up the volume, and he's going to pick up, you know, an extra 2 to 3 catches a game if need be. I think, you know, Kittle and Kelsey and LaPorta, and it's just about everyone else. You know, those 3 are a special breed at this point.
And all we keep hearing over the course of this offseason, because again, we talked about this a few weeks ago, it's just like Republicans and Democrats. It's the Goff haters and the Goff supporters. You're either fully behind him or you're not. And the biggest knock on Jared Goff, in the voice of the detractors, is that he just can't throw the deep ball. Well, make this perceived weakness into a strength with LaPorta as your would-be number 2 guy. I just mentioned a minute ago, he's not necessarily that deep ball threat. He doesn't have to be, because you're playing to the strengths of your quarterback of dumping it off for 10 air yards at a time. Throwing it 50 yards downfield doesn't necessarily help to put the ball in Sam LaPorta's hands, one of your best playmakers.
Yeah, without a doubt, right? So, I mean, you don't need to take that shot downfield, you know, 40, 50 yards. You're just going to, oh, hey, St. Brown's got double team. Okay, well, let's go to LaPorta, you know, and he's just going to be on the other side.
And then you have to respect the explosive potential of J-Mo on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he's going to probably be the 3rd option.
Yeah,
Khalif Raymond possibly in certain packages that he's possible downfield threat. So there's a lot for these defenses to have to keep track of on any given point in time, on top of having Brock Wright in there at tight end, who has been known to burst a big one at times.
Yeah, so I think what as I kind of see it right now, like I still think they do bring in, a Michael Thomas or someone like that. I'd love to see Donovan Peoples-Jones get pushed a little bit, and actually see, does he have anything left in the tank? Was it just kind of a rough transition, getting traded, mid-season to the Lions and just kind of adjusting? Because he has that size and stature that if LaPorta needs a breather, I mean, listen,
Or
I
Lord
think,
forbid gets hurt, because it's not like
yeah,
he's the most necessarily durable guy in the world. He's going to get banged up at times.
for sure. But I would say Laporte is probably going to be out there 90% of the time. So then when you throw in Brock Wright and you still need a little bit of a physical presence, in the slot or something like that, like that's what you can do with Donovan Peoples-Jones, or that's what you could do with the Michael Thomas if you bring him in. So, something that Khalif Raymond's an awesome slot receiver, but he's just not going to have that physical presence, obviously.
Yeah, he'll make a big play in a big spot when he needs to, but just from a
Mm.
volume standpoint, Khalif Raymond's not going to be your 9 catches for 150 yards and a touchdown week in and week out. That's just not what he is. But the thing that intrigues me most about this scenario as we have it laid out is, what's one thing that the Lions have struggled with for years and years on end with all the losing that they've done? And I know losing the turnover battle has a lot to do with it, but it seemed like their biggest weakness was just they never got enough first downs. They
Mm-hmm.
never moved the ball with enough continuity. They never kept their defense off the field for long enough of a period of time. It seemed like they were getting their butts kicked on the battle of who got more first downs in a game. And I feel like the more you have guys like Sam LaPorta on the field at the same time as Amon-Ra St. Brown, and having your Jahmyr Gibbs and your David Montgomery, all you're doing is you're setting yourself up to pick up enough chunks of yards to keep getting first downs, to keep sustaining drives. And the more you keep doing that, the closer you get. I know I'm sounding like John Madden here with your, oh, gee, thanks, Captain Obvious, but you're getting closer and closer to that end zone. And now you're not having to rely upon that, scary idea of a kicker. Now you're more or less in touchdown range and able to go for it on fourth and short if you're set up that way. You're just more in line to run the type of offense that I think Ben Johnson really wants to run by having those guys all on the field together.
Oh, without a doubt, and yes, yards is a nice stat, but at the end of the day, I will take time of possession every single time over yards, because yards are a empty stat in my opinion. Yes, they're great for fantasy football. Yes, they're great for gambling purposes, if you will. Time of possession over stats every single day, because you got that high time of possession, you are giving your defense a break. And that's something that I know we have seen. So again, that goes back to kind of what we're talking about in the front part of the show here with Stafford and Calvin Johnson. That hey, that was an offense that you could throw it 50, 60 yards downfield, have a guy go catch it, score a touchdown in 3 seconds. You know, um, but there was no running game, there was no stability, there was no sustainability. So that's what's different with what we have now.
And how many times in some of those big wins last year did you see the Lions come up with like 25 to 30 first downs in a game? And that's how you know that the offense is doing what it's supposed to, by having
Mm-hmm.
the proper personnel packages and the execution was there.
Yeah, absolutely. So many times too, in the second, third, fourth quarter, it's getting and extending drives and taking some time off the clock, and getting your running game involved, as well. It's not just something that you get with your passing game, but actually getting Montgomery and Jahmyr out there. So it's all coming together. We're in a good spot, and again, that's just kind of my 2 cents on it. That again, kind of going back to original thought here, that I think our number 2 receiver is on the team, was staring us in the face the whole time, and we just we're blind to see it.
You're listening to this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, Phil Byrne, a day late with you. Happy Tuesday to you. We are glad you could be along with us for the episode heading into Lions training camp. And the last several episodes, Phil, you and I spent some time breaking down each of the individual position groups on each side of the ball. And it occurred to me after we went through all that it would probably make some sense to maybe do the same with the coaching staff, because there has been a little bit of turnover on certain parts of the position group. So it makes sense to kind of have a little bit more of an in-depth discussion on the coaches before we really get going. So Dan Campbell heading into his 4th season. Can you believe that? Campbell heading into season number 4 as the Lions coach.
How many Lions coaches even make it to year 4, Vince?
That's crazy. I know Marty did make it to 4. Mooch did make it to 4. I don't think Marinelli got to 4. He got 3. After that, it was Schwartz. I think he got 5.
I think Schwartz and Caldwell are the only 2 that I can think of, like in the last 25 years.
And then Patricia was out after 3. So, and it looks like Campbell's going to be around a heck of a lot longer than 5 years based on what this trajectory looks like. Ben Johnson back for another go-around as offensive coordinator, and he did flirt with a couple of teams the last couple of off seasons, but he made the decision on his own to stay put. He wasn't interested in maybe what was behind curtain number 2, so we're thrilled to have him back for another go-around. And Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator, again, interviewed with a few different teams the last few years. He'll be running the defense again this year. So that's one thing that we really like to see, is the continuity among the head coach and the coordinators back for another season together. So there's no drop off as far as learning new plays, learning new terminology, or different sets of rules or requirements or anything like that with these new coaches. These guys can get right to work on Wednesday and just hit the ground running.
Continuity is great, right? And that comes with winning. That comes with coaches that want to be here, coaches that feel like there's more to accomplish. So, that's kind of where we stand currently, and it all starts with the big guy with Dan Campbell, and he set the tone, and he got coaches that fit his ecosystem, and a lot of them being former athletes in the NFL. And that's how he made his staff, and it's paid dividends so far.
Absolutely. And some solid guys in the offensive coaching staff room. You have Mark Brunell as your quarterback's coach, who has really worked closely with Jared Goff and allowing Jared to kind of turn things around in his career. One of the more underrated coaches in all of football, not just on this Lions coaching staff, but how about Hank Fraley, the offensive line coach? What a job he's done with these guys. I know we've talked a lot about Brad Holmes and his ability to seek out talent and draft accordingly, but what a job Hank Fraley's done with this offensive line, Phil.
I mean, I think any offensive line coach would love to have Penei Sewell on their team, right? So there's not much to mold with that guy. Like, he was almost a ready product from day one. But I think Hank Fraley has done an awesome job of, I think Graham Glasgow was good in his first go around with the Lions, but he went to Denver. He got a payday. He came back, and when he came back, he got better. And I think he got better because of Hank Fraley, and just kind of, he used to be a pro, so I think just being able to provide that experience to him. And, Taylor Decker has been awesome under Hank Fraley as well. I think those are 2 guys that, have gotten better under his tutelage. And, we know what Frank does in the middle. He's Mr. Reliable that he'll go play on one leg, one kneecap even,
Absolutely. You got Tanner Engstrand as your passing game coordinator, a possible low-key offensive coordinator of the future for if and when. We all know that Ben Johnson's not going to be around forever. There's just no doubt that he's just going to die as a member of the Detroit Lions assistant coaching staff. He will be a head coach in this league eventually, but a lot of people in some circles are saying that Tanner Engstrand may be kind of a dark horse offensive coordinator in waiting. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. Antoine Randall L is your wide receivers coach heading into this year, and also back for year number 2. Took over for Deuce Staley a year ago. Scotty Montgomery, the assistant head coach and running backs coach, rounding out the offensive assistants.
Yeah, and those are all guys that familiar names and faces, and Um, yeah, kind of the thought on Johnson is obviously he's so young, with everything. So uh coaches like to get hired young, I mean it's pretty few and far between that some organizations will go to you know, some of the older coaches and stuff like that, like bringing in like a Dan Quinn, like that's kind of a unique situation, that happened there. But he's gonna get his offer still.
And a couple of new faces looking towards the defensive assistants. Todd Wash out, Terrell Williams in as the defensive line coach. So we'll see if the defensive line is able to make any steps forward just based on coaching personnel changes as a whole. Dre Bly out, Deshae Townsend, again, another former player that the Lions have liked to stick with on their coaching staff, in as the defensive backs coach. And a guy who has been a mainstay from the very beginning, linebackers coach Kelvin Shepard, back again for year number 4 as Lions linebackers coach.
Yep. Yep. And Kelvin Shepard, I think, really sets the tone for the defensive assistants under Aaron Glenn. I think his playing experience and just being very relatable to his players has helped really bond a unit that I know prior to Dan Campbell coming in and the staff, it had been such a long time since the Lions had a good linebacker core. And just the fact that they've been able to do that now, and kind of bring that to the table has been really awesome to see.
And I think you can definitely look at Kelvin Shepard and say he's definitely going to be a defensive coordinator in this league very, very soon, if not next season. And you think back to when the Lions were on Hard Knocks a couple off
Mm-hmm.
seasons ago, and you could see him just kind of being so emotional and hyping guys up and being encouraging and this and that and the other stuff. So again, continuity is key with this franchise.
Without a doubt, yeah. And just like you were mentioned with Engstrom on offense, I think if Aaron Glenn were to get something, I don't think Lions fans should think that that's out of the realm of possibility following this year. If everything goes to plan, yeah, I would bet that it probably would be Kelvin Shepard taking over.
And of course, not to be outdone, the special teams coordinator for the Lions, Dave Phipp, and he has really, in my mind, turned what was a weakness for a lot of years into a strength. And obviously, it has been a topic of discussion for some time about the reliability of the Lions' place kickers. But in just about every other facet of special teams, I think you got to give Phipp some credit as far as doing what he does to work with the punting group, the special teams unit as a whole, and turning that part of the game into something that's a strength.
Yeah, yeah, and special teams coordinator is kind of the one that the least you hear about them or their name, probably the better. You don't want to see them on the sidelines because a lot of times it's going to be something didn't work right or a snap that got blocked or anything like
Kind
that.
of like
So
former Chippewa head coach John Bonamigo, right? You didn't want to see him, and when you did, that means you knew something was going not so good.
not so good, you bet. Yeah. So kind of same thing there, but with Phipp, I think the Lions have had some really good special teams under his watch, and especially with Dan Campbell wanting to pull a trick play out on special teams every once in a while. Just the way that they've been able to execute a lot of times. Jalen Reeves-Maybin really finding his place, on special teams under his watch too. So that's been pretty cool as well.
So those are your 2024 Detroit Lions coaches from top all the way down through the coordinators and the assistants. We will see what they're able to do with this group as we head into training camp this week. Final thoughts, Phil, before we officially get things going in camp on Wednesday. What's one thing that you are looking to see out of this group this first week of camp here?
No significant injuries. No significant injuries. And what I mean by that is not the turf toe, not the jammed finger. Don't want to see any ACLs. Don't want to see any Achilles. Let's get this team healthy, rolling into preseason, rolling into the what do you want to call it with the Giants? The
Team practices,
team practices,
joint practices.
Yeah. And I know the Lions need to have a couple of hard practices and things like that to set tenor of starting off the season, especially with where the expectations are going to be. But the last thing that we want is especially anyone that's going to be counted on, and as a vet and as a starter to have something that could be season ending throughout the process.
How does the approach change heading into this training camp? Because even though they had the success a couple of years back where they had the game in Green Bay, they just still didn't make the playoffs, though, so the mission was completely different. Now they are definitely going into camp in a completely different place. How do they approach this particular season as opposed to years past to where it resonates and clicks with the players? Or do they need to add any type of outside motivation beyond the fact that they came up very, very brutally short in that game against San Francisco?
Well, we have all seen from Hard Knocks in the last couple of seasons that Dan Campbell knows how to set the tone with that opening speech. If I were him, I would just have some really fast moving practices, get to it. And then what better way to deliver that kind of speech than at Ford Field on Sunday night against the Los Angeles Rams, and to remind them that they almost beat us, in the playoffs without a couple of different things. And it's all about unfinished business, and every play is going to count. And this year, they're going to take that next step, right? And that next step began with the Rams, and they get a chance to start it all over again. You're going to look at that 49ers team at the end of the season with so much to prove. So I would, if I were Dan Campbell, I would wait until the fiery speech until kind of right on the first week of the season to get the team fired up a little bit. I think they need to have some aggressive practices and get the team moving, but I would say he can set the tone in week one.
I don't know about you, Phil. I'm about ready to whip up a pitcher of Honolulu Blue Kool-Aid right about now. What do you think?
Yeah, hey, let's do it. Let's do it.
That's the story. Next time we talk to you, we will have some info from Allen Park for training camp news. That's going to be on our next episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Until then, Vince Progar, Phil Burns saying good morning, go Lions, forward down the field, over and out.